In 1650, Rome does not simply host a holy year, it compresses a continent into stone streets and candlelit air. Bells dictate the hours, incense stains the morning, and every bridge becomes a slow-moving river of feet. Princes, paupers, nuns, sailors. Widows, hundreds of thousands sleep upright, trade prayers for bread, and press forward toward doors that promise release. And for one pilgrim in Jubilee, Rome, the city feels less like a destination than what a modern megacity feels like, at rush hour faith made physical, and nowhere to breathe. Rome in the mid-17th century was not built to be comfortable. It was built to be convincing. Every stone path, every fountain mouth, every painted ceiling was part of a system designed to make one idea feel inevitable, that authority lived here, and it was sacred. But Rome was never just a city. It was a capital without an empire, a stage without an audience until the audience arrived. And in Jubilee years, the audience didn't simply visit, it flooded the frame, from the Alps to the Adriatic, from Spanish ports to German valleys. People began moving on foot toward a single point on the map, because Rome promised something no other place could time itself, could be forgiven. To understand why 1650 becomes so overwhelming, you have to see Rome as three interlocked pillars. Each pillar reinforced the others, like gears, until the whole city could convert belief into order daily. First was power. In an age when most Europeans would never see a king, Rome offered a different kind of ruler, the Pope, a sovereign who claimed both law and salvation. Around him sat dynasties of cardinals and noble families, names that turned marble into money, and money into influence. They funded chapels, commissioned altars, carved their crests into public space, and treated the city like a ledger of prestige. Politics here wasn't shouted in parliaments. It was whispered in corridors, traded in favors, and stamped onto stone where everyone could see it. Second was faith, and not the private kind. Rome specialized in public belief, belief as procession, belief as choreography, belief that could be seen from across a square. Pilgrimage routes were spiritual highways, and Jubilee years were the rare moments when the gates opened wider than usual. Indulgence was the magnet, but ritual was the machine. Confession, communion, the crossing of thresholds, the counting of prayers, each act translated invisible fear into visible motion. In a world of plague scars and sudden wars, the promise of mercy became a currency as real as bread. And then came the third pillar, architecture. Baroque Rome did not simply decorate the faith, it engineered it. This was an urban language designed to seize the senses before the mind could argue back. Wide avenues were cut to aim the body toward basilicas like an arrow. Facades rose like theater sets. Light was controlled, released in beams, trapped in domes, reflected in gilded ribs. Fountains didn't just provide water, they performed abundance. Even the city's soundscape bells, chanting, hooves, vendors, and hymns worked like a metronome, keeping the crowd moving. The result was a place that could handle contradiction. Rome could be filthy and magnificent in the same breath. It could smell of animals and incense, of sweat and wax, and still feel like heaven's embassy. And that is exactly why the Jubilee becomes the ultimate stress test. Because a Jubilee is not one event, it is an entire city asked to become a ritual instrument. Roads must carry bodies like arteries. Churches must process souls like mills. Hospices must absorb exhaustion. Priests must hear confessions like rain. The administration must keep order without breaking the spell. And all of it must happen while noble families compete for glory, while the papacy broadcasts strength, while artists and architects keep raising the ceiling of what a holy city should look like. Before the pilgrims even arrive, Rome is already tightening its grip repairing streets, expanding lodgings, organizing routes, marking the sacred stations. Then the first domino falls, the crowds swell. Then another prices rise, space collapses, tempers flare. Then another, the city responds by doubling down on spectacle, because spectacle is how Rome turns chaos into meaning. And in that pressure, the Baroque is not a style. It is a control system, tuned for awe, built to survive the crush. For the first time, you can feel the city working like a single machine power directing, faith fueling, architecture amplifying, preparing to be overwhelmed on purpose. By dawn, the city is already moving, not because Rome wakes early, but because the pilgrims never truly slept. They are folded into doorways and under porticos, wrapped in cloaks that smell of rain and road dust, counting the last coins, guarding a crust of bread as if it were a relic. Somewhere, a bell strikes, and the sound travels like an order. The crowd rises in waves. This is what a Jubilee day feels like at street level, not a procession, but pressure. Streets that seem wide on a quiet afternoon become narrow channels when thousands choose the same direction. The stones are slick with morning damp. The air is thick with breath. A line is never just a line. It lengthens, stalls, bends around corners, and then snaps forward again. And the first domino falls immediately. Too many bodies mean too little space. Inns overflow, so barns become dormitories. When shelter runs out, the city improvises with cloisters and church floors. People sleep sitting up, waking every hour to keep their place. Because in a Jubilee, time is both the problem and the prize. Then comes the second domino. Overload turns into control. Guards direct flows. Clergy and confraternities set routes. The sacred stations are not left to chance, because chance becomes chaos at this scale. Rome behaves like a valve system, opening here, tightening there, releasing pressure before it ruptures. Vendors appear with bowls of thin soup and candles, and pickpockets appear with the same efficiency. Illness moves quietly through the press. So do rumors of miracles, of thieves, of plague. Each whisper tightens the grip of authority. Each tightening makes the crowd more obedient. But the third domino is the strangest. As control increases, ritual intensifies. The more crowded the basilica, the more formal the gestures become. Knees touch stone, hands reach for cool rails, lips brush metals and crosses. Not because this is efficient, but because this is the point. Ritual is the language that turns an unbearable density of strangers into a single act. A typical pilgrim carries very little: a bundle, a token, perhaps a letter from a parish. But they carry a lifetime of dread, of dying unshriven, of debts that cannot be repaid, of sins that feel heavier than the body. The Jubilee offers a mechanism for that dread walk here. Confess here, cross here, pray here, convert fear into steps, convert steps into grace. So the day becomes a sequence of thresholds, a queue at a confessional where words are traded in whispers, a crush at a fountain where water is less refreshment than survival, a slow passage through a nave where wax and sweat merge into one atmosphere, and always the crowd, pressing from behind, not out of cruelty, but because everyone is being pushed by the same invisible promise that this effort means something. Then, at last, the mini-climax arrives. The holy door, not merely a doorway, but a line drawn between worlds. People wait for hours to approach it, and the waiting becomes its own trial. Feet swell, throats dry, tempers fray. Yet as the threshold nears, something changes. The noise dulls. Faces tighten into concentration. One by one, they cross. Some touch the frame. Some whisper names of the dead. Some tremble, not from cold, but from the sudden feeling that the universe has noticed them. And when they emerge on the other side, they are not wealthy, not safe, not cured. But they have done the thing that brought them across mountains. They have been counted. Zoom out, and you see the real phenomenon. This is not a local festival. It is a continental migration organized by belief. It pulls farmers away from fields, apprentices away from shops, widows away from villages. It fills roads for months, shifts markets, and forces Rome to prove it can hold the weight of Europe's hope. For the first time, faith was felt as mass. But if you only remember the crowds, you miss what Rome was really doing. The Jubilee was not just endured, it was processed. And the processor was the city itself. To understand how Baroque Rome could absorb a human flood without collapsing into panic, you have to stop thinking of architecture as background. In 1650, architecture was choreography. It dictated where the body went, what the eye found, and when the heart surrendered. Start with the streets. Medieval Rome had been a tangle-tight lanes, sudden corners, neighborhoods that swallowed strangers. But Baroque planners began cutting lines through that knot. Long, straight approaches aimed pilgrims like arrows toward basilicas. A distant facade was not simply a building. It was a target placed on the horizon. Even when the crowd could not see the altar, it could see the direction. Then came the plazas. A square is an invention that seems innocent until you see it filled. Plazas widened the bottlenecks, gave the mass somewhere to pool, somewhere to be counted. They turned movement into spectacle and spectacle into order. When thousands gather in a confined oval of stone, you don't need to shout commands. The space itself suggests how to stand, where to look, when to wait. But the true turning point was what happened at the threshold. Baroque churches were designed like machines for emotion. Outside, the city is noisy, uneven, profane. Inside, the air changes. Light narrows into beams. Sound becomes echo. The ceiling lifts away as if the building is opening its ribs to the sky. Your body, still sore from the street, suddenly feels small in a way that can be interpreted as humility. And this was not accidental. It was orchestrated. Processions, banners, and hymns provided moving reference points so the crowd could follow without thinking, like iron filings aligning around an unseen magnet in plain daylight. The church understood a simple principle: if you can control the senses, you can stabilize the crowd. Awe is a form of discipline. When people feel watched by something higher than themselves, they behave. So every element of Baroque Rome worked like a funnel. Facades pulled you in. Naves pushed you forward. Side chapels offered micro-moments candles. Relics whispered vows so the Mass could break into manageable units without ever breaking apart. Even the repetition of ritual acted like a metronome. Kneel, stand, cross, move, wait. The rhythm smoothed friction between strangers. Then came the domino effect. Individual emotion became collective behavior. One person falls silent, then a dozen, then 100, until an entire nave seems to hold its breath. One person kneels, and the gesture spreads like gravity. The crowd, which outside felt like pressure, inside becomes a synchronized organism. And from that synchronization comes the next layer: durable power. Because the Jubilee was not only about forgiving sins, it was about proving capacity. It showed that Rome could summon Europe, contain it, and send it home with the same story: that the church was not merely a set of beliefs, it was an infrastructure. It could organize bodies as well as souls. Notice what is missing here. There are no modern loudspeakers, no printed schedules in every hand, no police lines and barriers in the way we imagine crowd control. And yet the city manages flow through design, symbolism, and repetition. Baroque is the soft technology of persuasion. It does not force you to obey. It makes obedience feel like the natural shape of the space. While pilgrims believed they were moving through Rome, Rome was moving through them, building a memory that would outlast the blisters. The stones taught their eyes where holiness lived. The ceremonies trained their bodies in patience. The spectacle convinced them that order was beautiful. And that is the twist. Baroque Rome is often described as art. In a Jubilee year, it reveals itself as governance, an emotional architecture capable of turning a continent's anxiety into a single, manageable procession. By evening, the light in Rome turns the color of old gold, and the crowd begins to thin, not because the city has emptied, but because it has spent itself. The pilgrim who crossed the holy door is now sitting on a step that is not theirs, eating something small and stale, listening to the last hymns spill into the street like smoke. Somewhere, a bell insists on the hour, as if time itself needs supervision. The day ends the way it began, with bodies looking for a place to fit. Some find a floor in a hospice. Some fold into the shadow of a column. Some pay for a corner of straw and call it shelter. The city exhales, but it does not relax. It resets. Because tomorrow the same routes will be walked, the same queues will form, the same thresholds will be crossed, and the same human river will be guided back into order. But the true turning point of a Jubilee is not what happens inside the basilicas. It is what happens afterward, when tens of thousands of people carry Rome home in their memory. They return to villages that have never seen marble. They describe ceilings that seem to float. They repeat the rhythm of ritual like a song. They tell their children they stood in a crowd so large it felt like the world had gathered in one place, and yet it moved as if it had a single pulse. This is how the Jubilee becomes more than an event. It becomes a template. First, it leaves marks on Rome itself. The city learns to widen arteries, to build staging grounds, to create institutions that can absorb strangers, hospices, confraternities, routes, rules, early systems that look, in outline, like modern logistics. A city that can host a continent once will keep reshaping itself to do it again. Centuries later, when tourists follow the same long sight lines to the same domes and fountains, they are still walking through a landscape built for crowds. Second, it reshapes the culture of pilgrimage. The journey is no longer only private penance. It becomes a mass behavior, synchronized across borders. People begin to move in waves, to plan around calendars, to imagine mercy as something accessed through participation in a shared moment. A Jubilee teaches Europe that belief can scale, that faith can be organized, with routes, tokens, hosts, and schedules. And then comes the wider legacy, the one that feels uncomfortably familiar. Because what Rome is practicing in 1650 is not simply hospitality, it is crowd management through meaning. It takes personal emotion, fear, hope, guilt, relief, and turns it into predictable motion. The city dictates rhythms, orchestrates attention, choreographs waiting. It gives the individual a role inside something larger, and in exchange, it gains stability. This is why the Jubilee is a draft of the mass society to come. Long before factories taught people to move by whistles, Rome taught people to move by bells. Long before stadiums and rallies perfected the control of huge crowds, Rome perfected the architecture of gathering. It discovered that when enough humans share the same story, their bodies can be guided with remarkable precision. Of course, the pilgrim does not think in those terms. They think in blisters and prayers. They think in the chill of stone under a knee, the sudden quiet before a doorway. They think they came to touch the holy. But Rome touched them back. It placed them inside a machine made of stone, music, light, and rule. And it sent them home, carrying not only forgiveness, but a new sense of what a city can do when it holds your attention completely. And if that sounds modern, it should, because the world of mega-cities, mass events, planned routes, controlled flows, and engineered awe did not appear out of nowhere. In Baroque Rome, during Jubilee 1650, it was quietly rehearsed. The rhythm never stopped. It only changed instruments again.